Trust is one of the most fragile yet powerful elements of human existence. It forms the invisible fabric that holds together relationships, families, communities, and even the individual's relationship with themselves. When trust exists, it creates a space where openness and vulnerability can flourish. It allows communication to flow without hesitation, decisions to be made with confidence, and hearts to feel safe in the presence of another. But when trust is lost, the structure that seemed so strong can crumble with startling speed. The ground beneath feels unstable, the bonds that once gave meaning feel weakened, and life becomes marked by a lingering uncertainty that penetrates every layer of one's being. The loss of trust rarely happens in one single moment. It builds quietly, often hidden in small fractures that go unnoticed until the weight of betrayal, deception, or disappointment becomes too great to ignore. At first, there may be denial, a desire to dismiss what happened, to believe that it was not as harmful as it felt. But over time, these small betrayals accumulate and they create a distance that is hard to bridge. What once felt effortless now requires effort. What once felt natural now feels forced. The mind begins to question everything, replaying past interactions, analyzing words and gestures, searching for signs that were missed. Trust, once lost, awakens a mind that is no longer at ease. At the core of trust lies consistency. It is not built by promises, but by repeated actions that reflect reliability, honesty, and integrity. When this consistency is broken, the heart feels exposed to uncertainty. The one who trusted may feel as though the foundation beneath them has collapsed. The certainty that gave peace is replaced by doubt. It is not simply a loss of faith in another, but often a loss of faith in oneself, in one's judgment, in one's ability to discern truth from illusion. The loss of trust is, therefore, not just about others, but also about the relationship we hold with our own perception and intuition. This loss carries weight because trust is tied to safety. To trust someone is to believe that in their presence, you can be authentic, unguarded, and free. Without it, every word must be measured, every action calculated, every silence questioned. Life becomes a performance, no longer an authentic expression of the self. And this guardedness drains energy, turning what was once light and effortless into something heavy and tiring. In the absence of trust, there is tension in the body, restlessness in the mind, and unease in the spirit. Loss of trust also transforms time. The past becomes tainted with doubt, the present clouded by suspicion, and the future uncertain. Memories that were once cherished are re-examined under the harsh light of betrayal, leading to the painful realization that what was believed may not have been true at all. The present moment becomes filled with hesitation, unable to fully enjoy connection or ease because the mind remains alert for signs of deception. The future, once imagined with optimism, now feels precarious, as though it could collapse at any moment. Time itself feels distorted, each moment overshadowed by the echo of mistrust. In the silence that follows betrayal or disappointment, the one who trusted is forced to confront uncomfortable questions. Why did this happen? How could I not have seen it earlier? Was my trust misplaced, or was it given too freely? These questions linger and deepen, and they often do not lead to clear answers. Instead, they reveal the fragility of human connection and the impermanence of certainty. The loss of trust becomes a mirror, showing not only the actions of others, but also the vulnerabilities within ourselves. Sometimes the pain of broken trust does not come from dramatic betrayals, but from repeated neglect, small dishonors, or unspoken promises that were never fulfilled. Each instance may seem minor, but together they weave a pattern that cannot be ignored. Over time, this pattern speaks louder than any apology, and the heart begins to close itself as a form of protection. The mind builds walls, not out of malice, but out of necessity. These walls, however, while shielding the heart, also prevent the possibility of openness and connection. The loss of trust thus creates isolation, a solitude that is chosen not because it is desired, but because it feels safer than vulnerability. Trust is deeply to the hope. When trust is broken, hope diminishes. The world feels less dependable, people seem less sincere, and even life itself can appear uncertain. The spark of optimism that once guided actions fades into skepticism. Trust is not only an agreement between individuals, but also a belief that goodness exists, that honesty matters, and that integrity can be relied upon. When that belief is shaken, it casts a shadow on more than just one relationship. It can reshape how one sees humanity itself. Rebuilding trust is often spoken of as possible, but it is never a simple return to what once was. It requires time, patience, and a depth of honesty that can only be proven through consistent action. Yet even with effort, the memory of betrayal remains. It lingers in the corners of the mind, a reminder that trust is not invincible. Those who have lost trust carry with them an awareness that cannot be erased, an alertness that now colors every connection. It is not a weakness, but a scar, a mark that something once sacred was broken and will never be seen in the same light again. The loss of trust is a profound teacher. It shows the value of truth, the necessity of integrity, and the importance of presence in relationships. It reminds us that words without action are empty, and promises without consistency are illusions. It forces the individual to look deeply at what they expect from others and what they offer themselves. Though painful, it brings clarity, and within that clarity lies the chance to understand the true weight of trust, how easily it can be lost, and how deeply it shapes the human experience. Respect is one of those invisible currencies that cannot be bought, cannot be demanded, and cannot be sustained through fear or control. It is something that grows naturally when there is integrity, consistency, and truth in the way a person lives and interacts with others. Yet when it is lost, it rarely disappears suddenly. It erodes quietly and steadily, like a river wearing down stone. The loss of respect carries with it a weight heavier than most people realize, because once gone, it is rarely restored to its original strength. At its core, respect is recognition. It is the acknowledgement of value, of dignity, of trustworthiness. When people respect you, it means they see qualities in you that align with truth, with fairness, with strength of character. It is not about titles, possessions, or positions of power. Those things may create fear or admiration, but respect goes deeper. It is rooted in authenticity. The loss of respect begins the moment there is a gap between who one claims to be and who one truly is. That gap widens when words are not matched by actions, when promises are broken, and when the foundation of honesty crumbles. Consider the way respect functions in relationships, whether personal or professional. At first, it can be abundant, flowing easily because of the freshness of connection, the sense of possibility, and the hope that both sides will bring their best selves forward. But if deception enters, if arrogance replaces humility, or if neglect takes the place of care, the respect slowly drains away. And once people stop respecting someone, they stop listening deeply, they stop trusting, and they stop giving their best energy in return. The loss of respect fractures not just the relationship, but the energy between individuals, leaving behind a hollow interaction where once there was life. Respect cannot be forced back into existence. Attempts to control or demand it usually create the opposite effect. When someone insists on being respected without embodying the qualities that invite respect, they create resentment. People may nod, smile, or comply outwardly, but inside, the recognition has already vanished. This is why leaders who rely on authority alone often find themselves surrounded by people who appear supportive but quietly withdraw their trust. Respect is not obedience. Respect is earned alignment. When it is lost, the outer structure may remain, but the inner substance has disappeared. The loss of respect also reveals much about one's internal state. If a person continually finds that others no longer respect them, the question is not about those others. The question must be turned inward. Where have I stepped away from integrity? Where have I lost connection to truth? Where have I failed to uphold the very values that once inspired respect? The absence of respect becomes a mirror, showing not how others have changed, but how one's own actions, attitudes, and choices have altered the landscape. There is a silence that follows the loss of respect. Conversations may continue, but the depth is gone. Words may be exchanged, but they no longer land with meaning. People may remain in the same spaces, but the invisible bridge of trust is broken. This silence can be more painful than open conflict, because in conflict there is at least engagement, a chance for resolution. But the silence of lost respect signals withdrawal, the quiet decision that the energy once given will no longer be invested. It is important to recognize how fragile respect can be, and yet how powerful it remains when cultivated with care. A single act of betrayal, a single moment of hypocrisy can undo years of effort. But respect built on sincerity, humility, and unwavering authenticity is resilient. It may face storms, misunderstandings, or disagreements, but it holds strong because it is not tied to appearances. It is tied to truth. The erosion of respect only occurs when there is a deviation from that truth, When respect is lost, relationships often continue in form but die in essence. A marriage without respect becomes a hollow companionship. A workplace without respect becomes an arena of compliance and resentment. Friendships without respect turn into fragile exchanges of convenience. The structure remains, but the soul is gone. And the absence of respect always brings with it a loss of energy, a loss of inspiration, a loss of connection that no amount of external effort can replace. To understand respect is to understand energy itself. Energy flows where there is trust, honesty, and alignment. When those elements are absent, the energy withdraws. Respect is not about flattery or fear, but about recognizing the living presence of integrity in another. The loss of respect is therefore not just a social problem, it is a spiritual one. It means the energy of recognition has withdrawn, that the vibration of trust has been disrupted. This is why those who value respect must guard it carefully, not through external defense, but through internal consistency, by living in alignment with their values. By speaking with clarity, by acting with honesty, they protect the invisible currency that gives life to all relationships. And yet, even when respect is lost, it teaches. It shows the cost of arrogance, the fragility of trust, and the importance of authenticity. The loss of respect is not only an ending, it is also a lesson written clearly in silence, reminding us that no title, no wealth, no appearance can hold value if the foundation of integrity has already been abandoned, and peace is not something that simply arrives and stays without care. It is delicate, like a flame in the wind, needing awareness, attention, and respect to remain alive. When peace is present, life feels lighter. The mind becomes clear, the body feels less burdened. And even the challenges of existence seem less overwhelming. Yet peace can be lost, often without noticing at first, slipping away gradually as distractions, pressures, and unexamined emotions fill the space it once occupied. The loss of peace is not sudden like a door slamming shut, but rather like a slow fading of light, until one day you realize that the room has grown dark. This loss begins within the mind. A single thought left unchecked can turn into worry. Worry, fed with more attention, becomes fear. Fear, carried long enough, becomes restlessness. When the mind clings to what has already passed or projects into a future that has not yet arrived, peace slips further away. The constant chatter inside leaves no room for stillness. The river of thoughts keeps flowing, yet instead of clarity, the waters grow muddy. Without silence, peace cannot breathe. Another root of losing peace comes from expectations. Humans naturally want life to follow their design. They want situations to unfold as imagined, people to behave as hoped, and outcomes to match their desires. But the world does not move according to personal plans. It moves according to its own rhythm, vast and unpredictable. Each time reality resists expectations, frustration is born. Frustration becomes irritation, irritation becomes anger, and anger leaves the heart unsettled. The insistence that life must always align with desire is one of the strongest ways to push peace away. The body also reveals the loss of peace. Shoulders tighten, the jaw stiffens, the breath shortens. Sleep becomes shallow. Small triggers cause big reactions. When peace is gone, even silence feels uncomfortable because the unrest inside echoes louder in quiet spaces. People then seek distraction to escape the noise. Endless scrolling, consuming, talking without purpose, working without pause. Yet all these only add more layers of disturbance. The emptiness remains covered, not resolved. Relationships too become affected by the absence of peace. Without inner balance, every word from another feels like a potential threat. Misunderstandings multiply, patience becomes rare, and compassion weakens. When the mind is unsettled, it projects unrest outward, assuming the world is hostile because the inner world is already at war. What could have been a moment of connection turns into conflict. What could have been understanding turns into distance. The loss of peace also comes from attachment to control. People try to manage every detail, hold on to every person, resist every change. But life by nature is movement. To resist its flow is like trying to stop the tide with bare hands. The harder one holds, the more energy drains away, and exhaustion replaces serenity. Control gives the illusion of safety, but it comes at the price of peace. Noise, both external and internal, plays another role. Constant stimulation, never-ending information, and ceaseless demands create a climate where stillness feels foreign. The mind becomes addicted to activity, afraid of quiet. But without quiet, the nervous system never rests, the emotions never settle, and clarity never arises. Peace is not found in more. but in less. Yet in the modern condition, less is often feared. There is also the loss of peace through comparison. Looking at others and measuring oneself against them leads to dissatisfaction. What another has seems greater, what oneself holds seems smaller. But comparison is endless, for there will always be someone ahead and someone behind. The pursuit of worth through comparison ensures that peace remains out of reach. In times of loss of loved ones, loss of opportunities, loss of health, peace is tested most. The pain of change can shake the ground beneath. When the mind refuses to accept what is gone, it replays memories, clings to images, or resists the truth. This resistance prolongs suffering and creates deeper unrest, yet even here, the loss of peace is not from the event itself, but from the refusal to allow life to move as it must. The absence of peace influences perception. When the mind is restless, problems appear larger, solutions appear smaller, and hope feels distant. The same event seen through a peaceful mind feels manageable, but through an unsettled mind feels overwhelming. Peace, therefore, is not just an emotional state, but a lens through which life is experienced. The loss of peace is not permanent, but its presence or absence shapes every corner of life. Without it, joy loses depth, relationships lose harmony, and even success loses satisfaction. Peace is the soil in which all other qualities can grow. Without soil, seeds dry out no matter how much water is given. To recognize the loss of peace is the first step. To observe the restlessness without judgment, to notice the attachment without resistance, and to acknowledge the noise without drowning in it are acts of awareness. Awareness shines light into the darkened room. It does not restore peace immediately, but it begins to create the conditions where peace can return, like a flame carefully sheltered from the wind until it grows strong enough to shine steadily again. When we speak about support, we are not only referring to the physical form of someone holding your hand or standing by your side. Support takes many shapes. It can be the presence of a friend, the comfort of a mentor, the stability of family, the guidance of a teacher, or the safety of a community. Support is that invisible thread that makes us feel that the weight we carry is not entirely our own. But there comes a moment in life when those threads begin to loosen, when what was once steady beneath your feet shifts and the familiar ground disappears. This is what we call the loss of support. The loss of support often feels like falling without warning suddenly. The people who once stood close may step away, the system you depended on may collapse, or the place you trusted to give you strength no longer exists. The first reaction to this absence is confusion, followed by fear. You ask yourself, how will I move forward now? How will I hold myself without the hands that once held me? The absence feels like a hole, an emptiness that cannot be easily filled. And yet, within this emptiness lies the first test of inner resilience. Support creates balance, but balance that depends entirely on external forces can never be permanent. Life is designed to test the places where we lean too heavily. If you lean only on others, life will ask you to stand on your own. If you depend too much on structure, life will shake the structure until you see how much of your stability comes from within. Loss of support is therefore not only a challenge, it is a mirror. It reflects back to you the places where you have relied too much, trusted too blindly, or avoided your own responsibility to cultivate inner strength. When the ground falls away, the instinct is to grasp. You reach for anything, another person, another promise, another structure to replace the old one. But if every time support is taken, you simply reach for something else outside of you, the cycle continues. True transformation comes when you resist the urge to replace and instead pause in the absence. The emptiness, as painful as it is, becomes the training ground where you discover that what you thought was gone forever might have been waiting inside you all along. The loss of support also reveals the nature of impermanence. Everything in life moves, shifts, and eventually changes form. No relationship, no institution, no external source of stability can last forever. To resist this truth is to suffer, because the very fabric of existence is woven with impermanence. By experiencing loss, you are confronted with the raw reality that nothing can be held onto indefinitely. This realization is not meant to break you, but to awaken you. When you see that support can disappear at any time, you begin to cultivate the only form of stability that cannot be taken: your own awareness, your own capacity to stand firmly within yourself. Consider the way a tree grows. In its early years, it may need a wooden stake tied to its trunk to keep it upright against the wind. This stake is support, but if the stake remains forever, the tree never learns to root itself deeply. It may appear strong, but its strength is borrowed. When the stake is removed, the tree trembles and bends, but gradually its roots dig deeper into the soil. It is in the absence of the external support that the inner support is cultivated. In the same way, your loss is not meant to destroy you, but to force you to grow roots where you never thought you could. Many people resist loss by holding on tightly to what is already slipping away. They grip with desperation, believing that if they just try harder, the support will return. But in truth, clinging only deepens the pain. Loss demands acceptance, not resistance. Acceptance does not mean indifference. It means acknowledging the reality of what has changed and opening yourself to the possibility that new strength can emerge from within. To accept loss is to stop fighting against what has already dissolved. There is also a hidden clarity that arrives in moments of loss. When you no longer have the cushion of support, you begin to see yourself more clearly. All the layers that were hidden behind relationships, positions, or external roles fall away, and what is left is the raw self. At first, this rawness feels unbearable because it lacks protection. But with time, you begin to see that it is also pure. In this purity lies your original strength, the untouched part of you that was never dependent on anyone or anything else. Loss of support is not only about individuals, it can occur within yourself. There are times when you lose the support of your own confidence, when self-doubt takes over. You may feel abandoned not by others, but by your own inner trust. This kind of loss is perhaps the most difficult because you cannot walk away from yourself. But even here, the same principle applies. What seems lost is not truly gone. It is simply hidden, waiting for you to rebuild from within. Through the loss of support, you are reminded that the external world can never provide permanent stability. Support is valuable, but it must always be seen as temporary. To rely on it too much is to build your foundation on sand. To use it wisely is to let it guide you until you are strong enough to stand without it. This process is not gentle, but it is necessary. The loss, though painful, is an invitation to reclaim the power that external support once concealed. Loss of support teaches you to meet the silence of emptiness without fear. It teaches you to carry your own weight, to walk forward when no hand is offered, to speak with your own voice when no echo answers back. It shows you that the absence of others is not the end, but the beginning of a new relationship with yourself. It strips away illusions, reveals impermanence, and ultimately points you toward the one form of support that can never be taken away, the strength cultivated in stillness, the stability born from within, the roots that dig deep into the unseen soil of your own being. Growth is often celebrated as the ultimate proof of life. When a tree stretches upward, when a flower unfolds, when a river keeps flowing, we see movement, expansion, and renewal. But just as growth can be present, it can also be absent. And the absence of growth, though rarely acknowledged, is not neutral. It carries its own weight, its own consequences, its own quiet message about how life is being lived. The loss of growth is not something that happens overnight. It comes slowly, almost invisibly, until one day the realization emerges: something has stopped moving, something has stopped expanding, something within has chosen stagnation over flow. The loss of growth can be recognized in many forms. It may appear as routines that repeat endlessly without progress. It may reveal itself in the same thoughts circling the mind, thoughts that were never challenged, never elevated, never transformed into something new. It may manifest in relationships where the same conflicts repeat, the same misunderstandings linger, and no deeper connection is achieved. Or it may show up in the body itself when the energy feels heavy, unchanging, when no vitality or renewal is sensed. Growth, when absent, leaves a void, and that void fills itself with frustration, doubt, and a subtle form of despair. Why does the loss of growth occur? One reason is comfort. Comfort is seductive. It whispers, "Stay where you are, for here you are safe." And indeed, in comfort there is a certain type of safety, but it is the safety of stagnation. Like a pond that does not receive new water, comfort without change begins to grow stale. The human spirit was not designed to remain unmoving. Life is motion, and so when motion is denied, when the flow is blocked, the spirit begins to feel heavy. Another reason for the loss of growth is fear. Fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of uncertainty. Fear creates invisible walls that prevent steps forward. And because those walls are built in the mind, They often appear unshakable, convincing the one who fears that there is no point in even trying. The loss of growth also arises when there is an unwillingness to let go. When one holds tightly to the past, when one clings to old identities, when one refuses to release what has already served its purpose, then there is no space for something new to enter. Imagine carrying a bag filled with stones. Every step becomes heavier, slower, and eventually the weight makes forward movement nearly impossible. The stones in that bag are attachments, regrets, old wounds, and outdated stories of who one thinks they are. If those stones are not released, growth cannot happen. In nature, the process of growth is always tied to cycles of release. Trees grow tall not only because they stretch upward, but because they shed their leaves when the season requires it. Rivers remain alive not only because they flow, but because they let go of old water so that new streams can replenish them. The soil gives rise to plants, but only after the previous harvest is allowed to return to the earth as nourishment. In every aspect of nature, growth is connected to renewal, and renewal cannot exist without letting go. The loss of growth, therefore, is not only the absence of expansion, but also the refusal to release what must be released. When growth is lost, the individual begins to feel out of alignment with life itself. There is a restlessness that appears, an inner tension that cannot be explained by external circumstances alone. Even when everything on the outside seems stable, something on the inside whispers that stability has turned into stagnation. This inner voice often becomes louder with time. It may show itself in dissatisfaction with work, in a sense of disconnection within relationships, in a lack of inspiration for daily living. Growth is not a luxury, it is the natural state of being alive. When it is missing, the human experience begins to feel incomplete, as if a fundamental rhythm of life has been silenced. The loss of growth is not only an individual matter, it can happen collectively as well. Entire communities, entire societies can lose growth when they resist change, when they fear new ideas, when they cling to traditions that no longer serve their people. In such cases, the collective stagnation becomes heavier than any individual weight. A culture that does not grow becomes rigid, and rigidity eventually leads to collapse. Just as water that does not flow becomes stagnant and unfit to drink, so too does a society without growth lose its vitality. Recognizing the loss of growth is the first step toward reclaiming it. Recognition requires honesty, and honesty is not always comfortable. It means asking questions such as, where am I repeating patterns without learning from them? Where have I settled for comfort at the cost of transformation? Where have I allowed fear to dictate the limits of my actions? Where am I holding on so tightly that my hands are no longer free to receive? These questions are not easy, but they are necessary, for they reveal the hidden roots of stagnation. The loss of growth also teaches something important, that growth is never guaranteed. It must be chosen. It must be cultivated. Just as a garden left unattended becomes overrun with weeds, so too does life without conscious effort slip into stagnation. Growth requires intention, effort, and sometimes discomfort. It requires the courage to step beyond what is familiar, the patience to endure setbacks, and the willingness to transform again and again. And yet, within the recognition of the loss of growth lies a quiet truth that even in stagnation, the potential for movement remains. The seed that has not yet sprouted is still a seed full of life. The tree that has shed its leaves still carries within it the capacity to bloom again. The individual who has stopped growing is not finished. They are simply waiting for the spark that reminds them of their capacity to expand once more. The loss of growth is not permanent. It is a signal, a call to awaken, a reminder that life's true essence is motion, and motion is always available to those who choose to begin again. There is a strange paradox in life sometimes. It is not the gaining but the losing that shapes the path forward. When a man begins to lose himself, he does not notice it in a single moment. It does not happen all at once, like a sudden storm crashing through his world. Instead, it is gradual. A small compromise here, an ignored truth there, a silent acceptance of something he knows deep inside is not aligned with his spirit. Day by day, piece by piece, what once felt whole begins to dissolve. Loss of himself is not about misplacing identity in a physical sense. It is not about forgetting his name, his duties, or his roles. It is deeper, more subtle, more difficult to recognize. It is when the fire inside begins to dim, when the voice within becomes faint, when the clarity that once guided him becomes clouded by noise, expectations, and obligations. He still walks, still speaks, still appears to live as he always has, but something essential slips further away. At first, there is denial. He tells himself he is fine, that what he feels is only a passing phase, that everyone struggles in the same way. Yet underneath, the loss grows heavier. The smile no longer reaches his eyes, the laughter no longer resonates from his chest. He participates in the motions of life, but feels like a visitor in his own existence. He notices that he no longer moves with certainty, that choices feel blurred, that his actions no longer spring from conviction but from habit and repetition. The weight of this loss often hides behind responsibility. He convinces himself that he is simply doing what is necessary, what is expected, what must be done. And in fulfilling all that is asked of him, he begins to forget what he once asked of himself. The dreams that once pulled him forward begin to seem like distant echoes. The passions that once filled his heart with vitality turn into faint memories. The man continues to serve roles: worker, partner, father, son, friend. But in the silence of his own soul, he realizes he is vanishing. Loss of himself is not sudden collapse, it is erosion, like water against stone. Time wears away the edges until one day he sees that the shape of his life no longer resembles the shape of his spirit. And when he looks in the mirror, he may recognize his face but not his essence. This state is dangerous because it can persist without disruption. Life around him may look normal, successful even, while inside he carries emptiness. This loss cannot always be seen from the outside, but it is felt in every moment of solitude. It is the restlessness that will not let him sleep, the dissatisfaction that lingers after achievement, the silence that feels hollow instead of peaceful. Often, this loss comes from forgetting to guard the inner world. He allows too much of the outer world to dictate who he must be. The demands, the voices, the standards of others seep into him until his own voice is drowned. He begins to believe that the way to live is to conform, to adjust, to bend himself to fit. But in bending too far, he fractures. And though he may not show the crack, he feels it with every breath. Sometimes the loss arises from fear, fear of change, fear of rejection, fear of stepping beyond the boundaries of comfort. Fear persuades him to stay small, to stay silent, to stay safe. Yet safety becomes a cage, and over time he loses the courage to even remember what freedom felt like. Other times the loss comes from distraction. He becomes so consumed by busyness, so caught in the endless cycles of doing, that he forgets the deeper purpose of being. Surrounded by noise, he forgets silence. Surrounded by speed, he forgets stillness. Surrounded by demands, he forgets desire. And in this forgetting, his own essence slips further away. Loss of himself is the cost of neglecting presence. It is the cost of turning away from the inner compass. It is the cost of silence ignored, of truth avoided, of authenticity sacrificed. Slowly, the man who once lived with clarity finds himself in shadows. The strength that once came from alignment is replaced by the weakness that comes from disconnection. When he loses himself, even success feels empty. He may achieve, he may accumulate, he may stand in positions that others admire, but deep inside he knows the truth: he is absent from his own life. What he truly longs for cannot be replaced by material comfort or external validation. It is the return of his own essence, the remembering of his own being, the reconnection to his own soul. The tragedy of losing himself is not only the pain it brings, but the blindness it creates. He forgets that the self is not lost forever, only hidden. He forgets that the flame, though faint, still burns within. But while he remains in the haze of disconnection, he does not seek it. He walks each day with the quiet ache of absence, the dull reminder that something essential has slipped from his grasp. The loss continues until the silence becomes unbearable, until the weight of disconnection grows too heavy to ignore, until he recognizes that what has been missing all along is not outside of him but within. Yet until that moment arrives, he remains suspended in this state, carrying on with the face of a man, but without the fullness of his being,